Alexis, we got an update from court. Prosecutor really hammering home. They're asking for 11 years here. Prosecutor Slavic says this is not just a case about freak-offs and hotel rooms. This is about victims, hard about a man who did horrible things to other people. His currency was control. He weaponized it. All of the 3553 factor point to at least 135 months. The defense accuses us of seeking 135 months so that the court splits the difference. We think probation's recommendation of 60 months does not account sufficiently for the harm to Cassie and James. Remember, they were asking for about 7 years, the probation department. What do you make of that, Alexis? I mean, look, this is the prosecution's point of view. It doesn't mean that the judge is necessarily going to accept 11 years, but they're saying, even though he was acquitted of the most serious charges that could have seen him spend 20 years to life in prison, racketeering and sex trafficking, even though he was acquitted of that, it can't be overshadowed what he was convicted of.
I agree with the prosecutor, and I think that the court is also agreeing with that based on what they have been saying, that we do have victims that were severely damaged in this case, and that asking for basically a walkaway. I mean, the defense is asking for time served, more or less. And I don't think that the judge is leaning, based on what you just read, towards that at all. The prosecution is correct. People were victimized in this case. There was testimony, and he was convicted related to that.
Alexis, if that's true, I mean, Alexis, that says something, doesn't it?
Well, it says that he appears to continue to think he's above the law, that he can just, basically get away with these crimes, not have to serve any additional time, and go on his merry way. And I do agree. As soon as he can, he will be talking. But I think this is also consistent with the concern that the judge is having, that he is not showing any sort of remorse. He doesn't think, it appears, that he has done anything wrong. He appears to just think he was railroaded and everything he did was correct. These speaking engagements, if true, are very disturbing, and I think they're going to have a major impact on the judge's decision with regard to sentencing.
Alexis, update from court. Prosecutor Slavic says even in cases that decline to apply the cross-reference, significant sentences are handed down, including in this district. I guess the bigger question here, Alexis, is what realistically could his sentence be if he was acquitted of the more serious charges? If you couple transportation to engage in prostitution, if he was convicted of racketeering conspiracy, he was convicted of sex trafficking and transportation to engage in prostitution, that's an enhancer, that's an aggravator, it's part of an overall story. But it goes to this idea also, like, there are people who say he wouldn't have been prosecuted if all the government had was prostitution charges. They wouldn't have gone they wouldn't have filed the charges against them. They would have prosecuted him. So if he was acquitted of those serious charges, I do wonder, in and of itself, transportation to engage in prostitution, what could he be looking at?
For the transportation, it's up to 10 years per count. So we're talking 20 years is the max that of what he's looking at. But I don't think he's going to get anywhere. We've got probation coming in at 7. We've got prosecution only asking for 11. But also we have to focus on the fact that just because he wasn't convicted of those charges, remember, there was testimony with regard to support, for instance, the violent aspects. I mean, specifically that video. So, which he did, admit in the public that he did do that. There was that whole video where he was responding to, the video in the hallway at the hotel, which was one of the things that the judge did look at and consider with whether he was going to release him post-conviction. So, I mean, when they're saying that, like you were saying, the crossover, that the fact that he was acquitted doesn't take away from some of the allegations supporting that violent aspect.
Alexis, how much can a defendant's statements in court affect a sentence when there is no pro forma sentence? There is no mandatory, this is life in prison. It really doesn't matter what anyone says. There's a lot of room here. There's a lot of discretion. How much does it matter? How much does it affect what the defendant says?
Well, first, if I was taking the poll, I'd have to say I'm here for the drama too. But secondly, I that they is taken into consideration. But I mean, some of these statements that he's making, as well as this letter from the inmates, I'm not buying what they're selling with the letters from the inmates. I have a concern that those letters were made because these inmates possibly think that when they get out, there'll be some benefit to them, making that once Diddy is out. So I'm not buying what they're selling there. But the court does take into consideration that. But what they're really looking for from the defendant is that he has remorse, that he acknowledges what he has done is wrong, and that he wants to move forward in a positive and be a productive part of society and not go back out and could reuse drugs and abuse people and do the things that he was previously doing. And with that he's clean, he's in jail. So I mean, that doesn't mean there are plenty of inmates that have gone clean in jail and went right back out, start using again. So that, to me, that doesn't say much either. This speaking thing, as much as Tyler is saying that he doesn't think it's that big of a deal, I think it's a huge deal, because I could turn around as a prosecutor and potentially argue that it's re-victimizing the victims, that he's going to go out and he's going to be living, free, and potentially making these speaking engagements, making them feel unsafe. So, I mean, there's obviously good lawyers can argue both sides of the coin, but yeah, they're going to be looked at, but it's a balancing act.
We got an update from court, okay? So the prosecutor is really hammering away at Sean Combs and the aggravated nature of this case. Prosecutor Slavic, the video from the LA hotel, we're talking about the Cassie video, was played many times at trial and it never got easier. As to Jane, he punched her, he slapped her a little over a year ago when he knew he was under federal investigation. At trial, they said they owned the violence. Admitting to violence in front of the jury as part of a trial strategy is not accountability. Freak-offs were extended performances of sexual degradation and humiliation. Cassie and Jane did not want to have sex with strangers. He made them do it. Sorry I have to say this, but he had an escort urinate in Cassie's mouth until she choked. Her victim impact statement makes clear she still has nightmares and flashbacks and the scars on her body. Jane's text makes clear her anguish and trauma. Mia said she got PTSD and anxiety. Deontay Nash said he was caused lasting damage. Capricorn Clark says he blacklisted her once she spoke up. Chef Jordan Atkinson wrote how she was impacted. It was real and serious. So, Alexis, you take all that in mind. We have a question from Rosalba. Does the panel agree that the judge will want to add appropriate time for his rehabilitation because they're proof that he won't offend again? I mean, is there proof that he won't offend again? Is he a changed person from, this conduct that was mentioned, was illuminated during the course of this trial?
Great question. Listen, there's never proof that somebody is rehabilitated. I mean, the name of the game here at this sentencing is for, the defendant to say that, yeah, I'm rehabilitated, I'm a changed person, I'm going to move forward with my life in a whole different manner. Now, being in prison in jail is going to change you. There's no doubt about that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to change him for the better. He is, like you mentioned, Jesse, very charismatic. And, people tend to at least initially like him. So, I mean, I don't know if he's changed. In my opinion, I would say that he's not a changed person. I am not so sure that he's going to move through life as this quote unquote saint. But proof, we can't have proof. It's not like we can do a lie detector test. And even if you did, that's not admissible as to whether he truly is changed. As well as he may think he's changed, and in reality, he's not.
Update from court. We have a prosecutor Slavic says he blames doctors for prescriptions. He pretends he is the victim. He hasn't accepted responsibility for his criminal conduct. The information provided to his expert was incomplete. He will pose a danger at any age. He choked Jane at 54 years old. Prostitution causes other problems. It happens out of public view. General deterrence is needed. Send a message to all victims and to the public that this defendant's crimes are serious. You could encourage or discourage abusers. There seems to be a big point here, Alexis, of trying to explain why this is a crime, why this is serious, and why the appropriate sentence needs to be several years in prison. Because again, I go back to something. There are people who look at this and say, compared to what he was being accused of, prostitution? But the government is doubling down on it.
I agree, Jesse. I mean, this case, as we discussed at great lengths, was a difficult case because you had a situation where some of this, not the violent part, but the sexual part appeared at some level to be consensual. And then you had a relationship going on. So I think the prosecution is trying to hammer down that we have a situation that we had this, prostitution coupled with this very elevated violence, and that these victims that were part of this have been severely damaged. And this just isn't a run of the mill. Somebody goes, to a street corner, gets somebody, has consensual sex, and then it's one and done sort of situation. That he did this repeatedly. He has only been charged with 2 counts. And it was surrounded with such a violence. And we had this video. I mean, this video it was shocking. I think anybody who saw that video the first time was just shocked by that video.
Alexis, if the judge sentences him to 7 years or 11 years or what have you, as opposed to 14 months, which is what the defense has been asking for, can they appeal that sentence? What do you think the likelihood of successfully appealing that sentence would be? I mean, do you think the judge, if he were to sentence Sean Combs to significant prison time, that there's an argument this was excessive?
Well, if we were going to sentence him to 7 to 11, I don't think there's an argument for that because, I mean, first of all, I think that we're going to land about 6.5 is my prediction, okay, or 6.4. So I think that as long as, especially if he stays below probation or even at probation, I don't think there's an argument to say that that it was an excessive sentence. I mean, nobody is talking the 20 years. That is the possibility. So we're well below that. Obviously, the judge will have to do the sentencing and stay within the requirements to substantiate his order of whatever he does. Otherwise, people could be saying that.
Do you believe Diddy will get retried? So let's put aside the argument we've been talking about so many times on double jeopardy grounds. He's not going to be retried on racketeering or sex trafficking. Do you think he could ever be retried on transportation to engage in prostitution?
So this is a great question. So a lot of people don't realize this, that you can be tried both without double jeopardy in state court and federal court for the same crime. So that actually is a surprise to many people. I think that here in this case, we do have, I'm not sure what specific crime that Jay Riz is referring to, but a lot of them had statute of limitations issues that were attached to them as well. So if we're talking about retrying after a potential appeal on these 2 counts, I do not think that he's going to win an appeal.